Aston Martin is ready to build a super team as the pursuit of Max is the next step. Valtteri is ready to continue his career outside F1, and Kevin shares his experience back in the paddock. Do consider subscribing. Now let's get straight into the latest F1 news. Aston Martin Executive Chairman Lawrence Stroll dubbed Adrian Newey a bargain, with reports claiming his salary will be worth up to $30 million, $39 million per year, with the team across a 5-year agreement. It was announced on Tuesday that Newey will become managing technical partner at Aston Martin from 2025, heading up their technical team while also becoming an Aston Martin shareholder in a role that is set to make him one of the best paid people in the Formula One paddock. With Newey's next move now having been confirmed after months of speculation, it is Aston Martin that won the battle to sign him from 2025 onwards, once he departs Red Bull. The 65-year-old cited Stroll's hands-on approach to team ownership among his reasons for picking the Silverstone-based team, alongside the infrastructure that is being put in place at their new factory, with a new wind tunnel being opened as part of their continued growth. Newey's signing is the next statement of intent on their mission to become a title-winning team, and when the subject of the designer's salary was put to the team owner, Stroll was unequivocal in his belief about how much value for money he will prove to be. "I can tell you, Adrian is a bargain," Stroll responded to media, including PlanetF1.com at Newey's unveiling. "So certainly, I've been in business for over 40 years now, and I've never been more certain. It's not an investment, he's a shareholder and a partner, so it's the best partner I can bring into a company. We intend to be around here a very long time together. So, it's relatively inexpensive for everything Adrian brings in the partnership we will have." Newey added, "I think from my part then very flattered by the number of teams that did approach me. I had discussions with some of those teams, not all of them, but in the end it became a very clear and natural choice. I think arguably, next to Ferrari, then Aston Martin is the most iconic brand across the world. It's got such a presence and a feel to it, so of course that's special. It also ties actually in quite well, because obviously I was involved with the Valkyrie project, and I have a couple of classic Astons as well, so I'm well familiar with the brand and the magic that goes with that." Having announced Adrian Newey, Martin Brundle has warned Aston Martin's rivals that the design legend has a nasty habit of winning titles and will already have something in his head for 2026. Aston Martin finally put an end to speculation about Newey's future when they announced on Tuesday that he would join the team in March next year, having signed on as their new managing technical partner. The 65-year-old joins the team after 2 decades with Red Bull Racing that included 13 championship titles to go with the 12 he won with Williams and McLaren. He is, as Brundle put it, one of the biggest names in the sport, and one with a nasty habit that will concern Aston Martin's rivals. "Newey is a big name obviously in Formula One," Brundle told Sky Sports as Aston Martin confirmed the design guru's signing. "He's had a nasty habit in his last 3 teams of being involved in multiple championship-winning chassis and team efforts, 12 constructors and 13 drivers. He's known as a bit of a genius in the business, and he sort of tends to bring success along with him. If you're going to have Adrian with you, you need a certain amount of resource and control to go with that to make the best of his skills. But also we have 2026 coming up, which Adrian himself describes as the biggest step change in Formula One history, due to the chassis and the aerodynamics and the engines all changing at the same time. And so he's a man you'd want on board at that time. He, though, doesn't come cheap, with reports the Briton will earn anything from $20 million to $30 million per year, depending on incentives and his Aston Martin shares. But can the 65-year-old elevate Aston Martin from a point-scoring team into a championship-winning one? Well, that's a big challenge for a team, because if you've got Adrian Newey on board and you don't win, well, then you've wasted Adrian Newey, replied Brundle. If you do win, it's all about Adrian Newey. So it's a problem they have to manage. But Brundle warned that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to integrating someone of Newey's stature into a team. I have to say, Red Bull have been extremely good at using the genius of Adrian and compartmentalizing other aspects to make sure they get the best out of him, he continued. So, Adrian is 66 years old on Boxing Day. He's got this huge amount of success behind him. I'm sure this is probably his last roll of the dice with a big team, and he'll want it to be a great success. You can be sure big picture stuff, he's the man you'd want looking at that. Will he be there minute by minute designing stuff? And of course, a team like Aston Martin, like the other big teams, will a long, long way north of 1,000 people, and you've got to make sure you keep those people motivated and incentivized as well, in terms of they don't want to just be bit part players, so it's quite a delicate operation to introduce Adrian into a team like that. Adrian Newey will already have something in his head for 2026. But those are hiccups that will be worth it, given not only Newey's prowess as a designer, but also his prior knowledge of Honda's power unit ahead of the Japanese manufacturer's 2026 partnership with Aston Martin. Although he is joining Aston Martin in March already, the team stated in their press release that he will lead the 2026 car development when F1 puts all new cars and engines on the grid. He's worked with Honda at Red Bull. He'll help enormously on that front as well, as will Andy Cowell, the ex-Mercedes man who is becoming CEO, Brundle said. He'll have something in his head already about the really massive change of aerodynamics that go with the new power units of 2026. I'd be absolutely sure that big picture stuff he'll have a lot of critical ideas, and every so often he'll just knock something in here and there that will make the difference. And also, he's ruthless, is Adrian. If Adrian wants something, he will get it. Even if it seems impossible time-wise or absolutely impossible budget-wise, he will persist until he gets what he knows is right, and that's why you need a team of some might to make the best use of him. The arrival of Adrian Newey at Aston Martin is a huge statement signing by Lawrence Stroll, one that highlights the seriousness of his ventures. After months of speculation following confirmation of his departure from Red Bull Racing, Adrian Newey has put pen to paper on a new, long-term deal to join an increasingly impressive Aston Martin team. The former Jordan Force India squad has come a long, long way in the last 5 years. Ever since then-driver Sergio Perez forced the team into administration in mid-2018, the team has been going through an upward trajectory that even briefly got a little out of control at the start of 2023, as the AMR23 proved one of the quickest cars on the grid. Since taking over the squad and creating the Racing Point entity before evolving into Aston Martin for the 2021 season, team owner Lawrence Stroll has set about improving the infrastructure and facilities available at Silverstone. On top of that, he secured an exclusive engine supply deal from Honda from 2026, with the Japanese manufacturers flip-flopping on F1 participation, resulting in a split between it and Red Bull as Milton Keynes has turned towards becoming an engine manufacturer in its own right. Hundreds of millions have been pumped into the former Jordan factory, which is now unrecognizable as a sleek, futuristic technology campus where every facility imaginable is available to the on-site employees. Throw in a state-of-the-art wind tunnel, which is in the process of being commissioned to start its working life before the start of the F1 2025 season, and it's clear this factory is only a few months away from Stroll being able to channel his inner Star Wars fan and declare it the ultimate power in the F1 universe. But having the very best equipment available does not a world champion team make, and Stroll has sought to bring in the very best personnel he can secure in his bid to upset the status quo. Securing Dan Fallows as technical director, yoinking him away from Red Bull just after the start of the current ground effect regulations, proved effective to helping his team join in the fight last year, before settling into the upper midfield just behind the leading 4 teams this season. But getting properly involved in the leading fight means making Aston Martin an attractive proposition for F1's brightest and best. While securing the signatures of Sebastian Vettel and Fernando Alonso as drivers were big coups, both F1 world champions are no longer at the very peak of their powers. With the driver lineup secure for the future with Alonso and Lance Stroll, going after some of F1's leading technical personnel thus made sense as the potential untapped within Aston Martin's facilities now reaches the point of being tappable. 2 decades ago, Christian Horner, Danny Bahar, and Dietrich Mateschitz tempted Adrian Newey into leaving the established teams he'd called home for so long, with long, successful stints at Williams and McLaren, giving way to signing for the cheeky upstart Red Bull team. It was a huge deal at the time, with Red Bull not yet seen as the serious racing entity it really was and is now. But within a few seasons, Red Bull's technical prowess had grown to the points where wins became achievable, and, not long after, titles. The rest, as they say, is history. Stroll is now in the position Red Bull found itself in 20 years ago. All the investment, all the improvements, all the new infrastructure, having secured someone like Newey with his incredible track record, means any remaining weaknesses can be easily identified and plugged. Honda power units and NEWEY overseen car designs have been at the very top for quite some time, and the appeal of a fresh challenge for NEWEY may be the final piece of the puzzle the Silverstone squad needs to become F1's leading light. Encouragingly for NEWEY too is the fact Stroll is clearly willing to spend to get what he wants, with the Canadian having sought to take even more of Red Bull's main technical staff, as Pierre Wache and Enrico Balbo were also on his shopping list. Overtures which were resisted by the two men in favor of remaining loyal to Horner. With a brand new state-of-the-art factory and wind tunnel at his disposal, and the appeal of a fresh challenge, who would bet against NEWEY helping Aston Martin create cars that are no longer just gamely hanging on to the rest, but are F1's quickest? However, buying NEWEY doesn't mean buying championships. The arrival of such knowledge and experience will no doubt equip Aston Martin with the insight it needs, and it also means there are no longer any excuses to hide behind if the team fails to deliver over the coming years. In this regard, the drivers remain a question mark. Fernando Alonso, as incredibly talented and relentless as he is, will be 45 years old in 2026, the first year of the new regulation set. Can the Spaniard continue to defy biology and race at his very best against considerably younger talent, as he bids to set a new record of winning a title 2 decades on from his last? The history books suggest not. Lance Stroll may be a solid midfield performer, and is closer to Alonso this year than last, but has never shown the spark of genius that marks out the very best, like the man in the other Aston Martin has shown on so many occasions. Put him up against a Max Verstappen or Charles Leclerc, and it's difficult to see a scenario in which Stroll comes out on top. But the arrival of NEWEY changes the attractiveness of the Aston Martin project as a whole, for everyone. While Alonso and Vettel went to the team as a type of cozy retirement gig, the combination of all the above factors means Aston Martin suddenly becomes a very attractive proposition for drivers who are maybe also considering a fresh start and desire championships. Someone like Max Verstappen, perhaps. Much has been made of his relationship with Red Bull this year, following the breakdown in relations between his father, as part of his management team, and team boss Christian Horner. While sticking plasters have been applied for the sake of keeping the peace, it's clear the connection is no longer as unshakable as it once was, even if reported contract escape clauses have been tidied up for now. Under contract until F1 2028, Verstappen has suggested he's waiting to see whether or not the new regulations are appealing to him to continue in F1, but he's been firm in his stance that he's closer to the end of his F1 career than the start. With leading drivers regularly having caveats in their contracts related to car performance, it's not impossible to imagine that Verstappen has such clauses that would allow him to leave should Red Bull fail to deliver a car capable of certain minimum standards. But if Verstappen does decide to leave Red Bull at some point, or see out his deal right to the end, might Aston Martin prove his next destination? Give NEWEY a few years to make an impact on Aston Martin's direction, wait for Alonso to move on or retire, and simply slide across to reunite with the NEWEY-Honda combination that has given him so much over the last few years. The path almost seems to right itself. What would be particularly interesting to see is whether Stroll would be willing to move his own son aside in order to bring Verstappen on board, if the Dutch driver somehow finagled his way into being available for F1 2026. Consider just how NEWEY has proven so historically adept at caressing new regulations into dominant machines, such as with the 1998 McLaren MP4A13, the 2009 Red Bull RB5, even if the car was beaten to the title, or the 2022 RB18. His input into the 2026 AMR26 can't be underestimated at this point. A Verstappen-Alonso combination in such a car would be a combination worth watching. Box office entertainment as two alpha drivers slug it out to make history for a team with little by way of success in its past. Is that something Lawrence Stroll could resist? And just how unshakable is his belief in his son if Verstappen did become available? Added to that is the onboarding of new investors over the last 12 months into Aston Martin's ownership, and the passion project that started as a means to further Lance's career comes into sharper focus. Will family come first for Lawrence if F1 greatness beckons? Valtteri Bottas's F1 career may not be matching the highs of his Mercedes days, but the Finn is keen to continue for a 13th season. And if he can't, he reckons IndyCar is a good next step. Bottas arrived in Formula One in 2013 with Williams and secured 9 podiums with the Grove team before swapping to Mercedes where his career took off. Although he didn't achieve a world title with the Brackley squad, those going the way of his teammate Lewis Hamilton, he was a 10-time Grand Prix winner with the team and twice runner-up in the standings. But dropped after 2021 to make way for George Russell, Bottas moved over to Sauber, then known as Alfa Romeo, which led to a steep decline in points and positions on the log. So much so that today Bottas is P22 in a championship that only fields 20 drivers per weekend, as he's yet to score a point, his best showing back-to-back P13s. Despite the lack of top 10 showings, at 35 years of age, he is still enjoying life in Formula One and believes he has more years in him. I think Fernando Alonso is a benchmark, maybe an outlier, but I still have time, he told Motorsport Week. I'm actually just getting into my mid-30s now, so age is not an issue. In this sport with experience, you can always gain something more. I still feel like I've got many years ahead of me, and I'm not seeing the checkered flag yet. Bottas's current Sauber deal ends at the end of this season with the Finn, one of the many names on new Audi Chief Operating and Chief Technical Officer Mattia Binotto's somewhat long shortlist. It has been suggested by some in the media that the Finn is the leading candidate to partner Nico Hülkenberg next season. But if that doesn't materialize, Bottas reckons IndyCar in America would be a good series to join. I think I would have to monitor all the options, what makes sense for the future, for the short term and long term. But for sure, I would be racing something, he said. If I would have to decide now, it would probably be IndyCar. But I don't want to think about it too much yet. The 35-year-old could also switch to cycling as his next option, having qualified for the Gravel World Championships, which will take place on October 5th and 6th. Kevin Magnussen has detailed the wild journey of his F1 comeback as he prepares to depart Grand Prix racing for the final time. Haas boss Ayao Komatsu elected not to renew Magnussen's contract for 2025, meaning the Danish driver is likely to leave F1 as he is not under serious considering by any of the teams with a seat remaining for next season. Magnussen's career initially appeared over at the end of 2020 when Guenther Steiner dropped him and Romain Grosjean to make way for Nikita Mazepin and F2 champion Mick Schumacher, but former McLaren and Renault racer Magnussen was given an extraordinary reprieve. In February 2022, during preseason testing, Russian President Vladimir Putin launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, with Haas promptly ripping up Mazepin's contract owing to his father Dmitri's close links to Putin and the Kremlin, with both Mazepins being sanctioned by the European Union. Needing a driver at short notice, Steiner approached Magnussen, who agreed to walk away from a WEC program to partner with Schumacher, sensationally claiming 5th place in the season opener in Bahrain. He would go on to take pole in Sao Paulo for his and Haas's only pole position, but as his time comes to an end, Dane Magnussen has no regrets. No, honestly I don't. It has been fun, he told select media including Racing News 365. It has been fun trying something so unexpected, and it was a wild journey as I completely mentally closed that chapter. I then had a kid and started the next phase of my life with my wife and family, and the whole experience has been really exciting for us. I don't really care about the 5th place in Bahrain, but it is more the whole weekend. I was sitting on a beach with a drink in my hand, completely not in the F1 mindset. Suddenly I was panicking from the beach to the airport, and then I was in the paddock, sunburnt, but the whole transition was wild and exciting. Aside from the 5th place and pole position, there have been few highlights in Magnussen's comeback, but the soon-to-be ex-F1 driver was at peace with that, believing the honeymoon phase could not last forever. It is to be expected to have tough moments when you step into F1, he said. I was already an experienced F1 driver when I came back, and I knew what I was going back to, so nothing was really a surprise. I knew there would be bumps and not be smooth sailing. I knew there would be a honeymoon phase and then it would go back to normal. I had it all kind of thought through. That's it for today's video. I'll see you in the next one.